Are you scared? National sure hope you are, because it's the best way of making sure that when they lie to you about how they're tough on crime and it works, that you're going to believe them. Being tough on crime is a Conservative Party staple from around the world, and it's equal parts fear-mongering and playing on concerns to make 100% bullshit. And National is doing this in 3 ways. The first is manipulating data presentation. They have a stable of, look what we did, stats that they like to use. RAM rates are down 85%. There's been 49,000 fewer victims of violent crime, and youth offending is down 20 to 25%. RAM raids were down 85% before National was even elected in 2023, due in part to the tools that Labour helped provide, and the way that data is presented by the police actually show this much more accurately than that same data being presented in a different way by National, who just hope you look at it and go, oh, graph, so it's accurate. Chris Luxon and Paul Goldsmith have also admitted that they deliberately conflated victimisation survey data and police tracking data to make themselves look better and Labour look worse. That's where their victimisation numbers come from. Oh, and the Ministry of Justice and Oranga Tamariki have both said claims of youth crime dropping are misleading because it's not actually the data points that they track. What's being presented is, again, more cherry-picked data from Cabinet, specifically the reduced child and youth offending metric that tracks serious and persistent offending behaviour of about 1,100 individuals. So a small data set with disproportionate impacts that the government claims is a wider success nationwide. And those same organisations, well, they say overall youth crime rates, so anytime someone between 10 and 17 is referred to youth aid, arrested, or warned, has declined about 60% in the last 16 years. Rates have remained pretty consistent at a base level for the past 3 years, but there was a spike in 2022 after lockdowns ended. Oh, sorry, quick footnote here. I forgot to put this in the original piece, so I'm just going to add this now instead of completely re-recording everything. That data set that says the 22 to 25% reduction in youth crime, that really specific target that they were looking at of the reduced child youth offending rates, well, they only started collecting data and setting a baseline in June 2023. So we've only got 3 years worth of data for them to be able to claim that it's had that drop. So the data set isn't actually large enough to be able to give us an accurate measurement. But because the point isn't to actually keep you and your whānau safer, it's to make it look like the coalition is effective, well, that's why they've repeatedly ignored experts when it comes to making performative laws to appear tough on crime. International criminal experts have called them out on things like 3 strikes, which has never worked. Banning gang patches, which doesn't stop gang activity, but does move it off the streets, so it's harder to see. There's the youth boot camps, which only had a recidivism rate of 85% because one of the attendees tragically passed away before it was completed. Or removing cultural reports that better help identify ways to rehabilitate criminals that don't actually stop the crime from happening in the first place. And all of this while avoiding the one thing that experts say all over the world that does decrease crime rates: dealing with poverty. Then there's the second element that National seem to be going for to look tough on crime, and that's taking credit for other people's mahi to take to the electorate as their own. This weekend we saw National announce a policy for the election that would clarify consent laws. The government that removed RSE tools in schools that were helping young people better understand and recognise consent. Now I want to make sure that consent laws are clarified. And to be fair, clarifying those laws is not a bad thing. After all, it's why a cross-party working group had been working on this exact issue that National refused to work on, so they could campaign on it instead. The law is already written, it is ready for them to go, and they've got cross-party support, they just choose not to so they can campaign on it. Or the stalking laws from earlier in the year. National loves crowing about these, claiming incorrectly that under Labour stalking was legal. But this was a law that was originally put in the biscuit tin by Ginny Anderson from Labour as a response to a murder that occurred in 2022 that National refused to also work on. The current version of the law that they're taking credit for, that was also heavily fixed by the Greens' Tamitha Paul. Good ideas that keep people safe are not an issue. Cross-party support on them is awesome to see. But taking credit for other people's work, well, anyone who's ever done a group project in school knows how bad it is when someone takes credit for the work they didn't do. And then there's media. And this one's actually really fascinating because perception is the goal. So media narratives are really important. In 2022, research showed us that media coverage of ram raids and youth crime associated with those ram raids spiked exponentially. Data from the University of Waikato in 2023 showed the use of the term ram raid was used in media exponentially more between 2022 and 23. And police say they didn't start tracking the term until about mid-2021. Research done in 2024 shows that for every actual ram raid that the police reported, there was 1.6 news stories on it, and for every one of those news stories, there was a wave of editorializing, political commentary, and aggregate reporting that followed. And during the peak of the ram raid hysteria, 450 times the value of the damage that was caused by ram raids was stolen in white-collar crimes. That didn't get anywhere near the coverage. And it turned out that the majority of ram raids around the country were actually done by a cohort of less than 150 people, and mostly for internet clout. But that media perception was so powerful that National are still using it today to campaign and take credit for work they didn't do. And we know National care about perception after it was revealed that Paul Goldsmith had directly had up One News political reporters Mikey Sherman and Benedict Collins when they were unhappy with coverage of the fact that gang numbers now outnumber police, and requested more favourable coverage the next day to make up for the damage in perception it caused. Because if the media don't play along, then it means their tough on crime rhetoric is less impactful than they want, and fear isn't as much of a factor in how people vote. So, National has admitted that they deliberately misled the public on crime data. The public record shows that they're deliberately trying to take credit for work done across Parliament. And research and text messages show that they're heavily reliant on a pliable media to maintain the illusion. And the real evidence that they're not tough on crime is actually found in the economic data that shows us that people are being forced to steal to survive, being punished for being homeless, leaving the country in droves for a better life elsewhere, and businesses collapsing because a strong economy that looks after its most vulnerable is the actual best way to be tough on crime. And that's just something that this government isn't even willing to contemplate. Hello there, Kia ora podcast listeners. This one I've been trying to percolate for a little bit on how I wanted to talk about crime, because I remember doing, when they first started their like rush to get things done, I remember doing a piece that I called Dumb on Crime. Like national and right-wing governments say that they're tough on crime, but they're actually tough on criminals, and they tend to drive up crime. They're really good for crime in that respect. And of course, anything that this government says should be taken with a grain of salt, but I found it really fascinating over the last couple of days with National announcing its new policy around consent, and consent is a very important thing. I'm glad that there is cross-party agreement on what needs to be done there. But I find it hilarious that National is again stealing somebody else's homework. Like they did the same with the stalking laws, which I found really fascinating. There was the claim that National stole New Zealand First's Kickstart campaign. There's a lot there that you just sit there going, okay, this is really weird. It actually starts to feel like National doesn't have much in the way of policies that they're bringing to the table, and just kind of hoping that people vote on vibes. So it always surprises me when you see that's the campaign plan and the poll results, like, yeah, they're tanking, they're below 30 on most polls, but it's consistently below 30, which means that you've got 30% of voters who are sitting there going, we don't need policies or pricing or anything like that because the other side bad, other people bad. And that I think is really fascinating. So yeah, there's like big picture stuff. But at the same time, I'm sitting here going, you're talking about being tough on crime, and looking at what New Zealand First did over the weekend, and just looking at who they've got on their campaign list. There are people in there who actively went out there, who have supported and propped up people who abuse their partners, who grift people, who go out of their way to send threats, material harm, who threatened politicians during COVID. Like, there's so much criminal behaviour under the level, like under the top surface of what New Zealand First was announcing, that I'm just like, come on. And now they're all bickering, and it's hilarious to sit down and watch. And yeah, it has been fascinating, like absolutely fascinating. But I wanted to sum this up by talking about crime in general, because that's something that people really resonate with, and it's really important that people know specifically where the data is being pulled from. And there's some stuff in there that I'd love to have gotten, like there is a screenshot there from Sam Uffindell, who I used to explain the three things that they claim about crime, which has been their constant. These are the three things. He put a post out, he was in the media the other day talking about how he always goes into bat for tauranga, and that's why they keep voting him back in. When the thing you are most known about on the left is literally beating a child, maybe going into bat for somebody is not the best turn of phrase to use. And either he knows what he's doing and it's rage baiting, or he doesn't and he's oblivious and he's an idiot. And I don't know which. I've never met Sam. All I've got to judge him is the things that I've seen in terms of the media. And on one hand, it does feel kind of oblivious. I've seen him do some really oblivious things in the media. On the other hand, seeing the people who dislike him within Tauranga's community and the conspiracy theorists there, it's hard to tell. I have some sympathy for the fact that he is dealing with a bunch of insane, crazy people in his own electorate who are like New Zealand first level insanity. Anyway, as I said, tough on crime is not necessarily meaning crime is going to come down. This government has certainly proven that, and right-wing governments do this all the frickin' time. Anyway, I'm going to go and have a look through the list that New Zealand First has put out and update that on the website so you can see just how crazy the crazy people are that they're putting forward. It's so painful. Alright, until tomorrow, look after yourselves. Ka kite anō. Take care, live long, prosper, be one with the force, and I'll talk to you all later.